Welcome to the Call Your Shot podcast, your weekly sports recap podcast where we break down the hottest headlines, dissect the latest injuries, and serve up our own hard-hitting analysis of the past week in sports. But that's not all. We're not just here to talk about the past, we're here to predict the future as well. On the Call Your Shot podcast, we boldly predict the outcomes of the upcoming week's games.
Thank you for listening. This is the Call Your Shot podcast with your hosts, Alex Harris and Drew Moore. In today's episode, we're going to get into Thursday Night Football from last night, give some quick injury updates, some game recaps, and some surprise upsets from Week 5, previewing a few games from Week 6, and lastly, finishing with our Call Your Shot and Call Your Prop segments for all you betting folks out there. So getting started, first game of Week 6, we had Thursday Night Football. The Kansas City Chiefs faced the Denver Broncos. The Kansas City Chiefs were obviously the heavy favorite. I believe the spread finished at 10.5, and they ended up just beating the spread. They ended up beating the Broncos 8-19 overall. The Chiefs seemed in full control pretty much for the entirety of the game. They couldn't necessarily score in the red zone other than one time. Ended up being a lot of field goals for Harrison Butker, but the Broncos could not move the ball at all. Russ had 37 passing yards total in the first half and finished with just over 100 yards. So, Drew, what were your overall thoughts on the game, and where do you think the Broncos go from here? It doesn't seem like Russ and Sean Payton are going to be improving anytime soon.
Yeah, so this game was also kind of interesting in the sense that the Broncos always kind of play at least the past couple of years, they've always played the Chiefs pretty close. But then when it comes down to the end result of the game, I believe it's like, I don't think Patrick Mahomes has lost to the Broncos at all ever in his career, which is kind of interesting. But along with that, I don't know, you know how I feel about the Broncos. I was high on them last year. That didn't end up turning out very well. I was like, okay, I'm a Saints guy. Sean Payton will get this ship corrected and everything. And it's just more of the same, arguably even worse. Because not only did they regress on offense, they got better on offense. It was impossible to not get better. But they also regressed on defense. And that was the big area that was the only real hope for this team, was that their defense was just pretty dominant last year. And if they would have just only scored about 17 to 18 points per game, they would have had a much different outcome in their season. But because their offense wasn't doing anything really last year, they didn't have the result that they wanted to at the end of the season. And it's quite the opposite during this season, where you're seeing that the defense isn't holding up their end of the bargain. And ultimately, you're kind of seeing players quit on the team. And you see a lot of fights on the sideline between the coaches, yelling at each other, or yelling at the players and stuff. Jerry Jeudy talking nonsense, talking out of the side of his mouth to Steve Smith and everything.
Steve Smith
got
beef.
Yep. And I mean, it's one thing to like, say that, I am him and like, talk all this game and stuff like that. And like, I don't mess with you and stuff like that. If you're good and you can back it up. But to be fair, like, what has Jerry Jeudy really done since he's been in the league? Steve Smith can talk that talk because he was that dude. Like when he was in the league. I don't know what the rest of the season is going to look like for the Broncos, but it's not going to be good. I can tell you that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not exactly sure where the Broncos go from here. I think it's basically like a wholesale trade market at this point. I'm not exactly sure what you'd be able to get from Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy or potentially Surtain. But it does seem like they're going towards the worst team in the league potentially, and could be looking at Caleb Williams down the future. Sean Payton's not going anywhere, but I mean they're pretty stuck on Russell with his contract. But I'm not exactly sure with that.
There was some talks about. I think this is last year. Jerry Jeudy was supposed to be going for like a first round draft pick, which is kind of crazy to think.
Yeah. And Sutton was going for like a number 2, like a second round draft pick, and I don't know about any of that now.
Yeah. So I mean, they might have lost out on that opportunity for sure. But yeah, it's not looking good. And this is obviously not what Sean Payton signed up for coming out of retirement, as he thought that it was all why can't I think of his name? Coach for the Jets,
Nathaniel Hackett.
Yep. Thought it was all Nathaniel Hackett's fault for being one of the worst coaches ever. Turns out teams just might be bad, The
Yeah, we both had high expectations for the Broncos last season, and then coming into this season, we kind of tempered our expectations. I don't think we thought they were a playoff team, but we thought that they couldn't be worse than last year. As you mentioned, Sean Payton was talking about, it was the worst coaching job I'd ever seen with Nathaniel Hackett and stuff like that. And not only is he off to a worse start, he was a miraculous comeback away. They beat the Bears in a big comeback, but they could potentially be 0-6 right now. So they're 1-5, and they've lost to Nathaniel Hackett, as he now is the coordinator for the Jets. And it's basically been as bad as can be. And this was just kind of like the icing on the cake. So the Broncos just seem poised just for they're honestly, I think they're just going to trade everybody and just look for the future at this point. And, again, I don't think that you can move off of Russ, especially not until at least the end of next season, just because of his contract being so large. But I think that they're definitely looking at potentially the number one pick. From the Chiefs side of things, they start off, they're 5-1 now. I was going to ask, what are your thoughts on the Chiefs? Because they kind of feel like the Eagles. They're 5-1, they're winning games, but it doesn't look as good as it looked in the past. You have the loss of Eric Bieniemy, so their offense hasn't been that great. You have Travis Kelce, but we still haven't gotten that number one receiver. Rashid Rice looks like he's probably going to be the guy, but still hasn't really stepped up as much as people thought he would. So do you have any concerns about the Chiefs going forward?
A little bit, but at the same time, I think it's one of those things where the Chiefs are just having fun out there. Like you go into a game, you're favored by double digits. Like you know what's going to happen at the end of the day. There's never a doubt that the Chiefs were going to win this game. And so like for instance
Broncos, yeah.
on third and short, the Chiefs are actually one of the worst teams in the league when it comes to third and short. But then that's mainly because they always run all these Mickey Mouse plays and try and do all these, fancy things and stuff instead of just, having Patrick Mahomes throw the ball to whoever else is open, because there's always somebody open somehow, some way, because Andy Reid always schemes up like the perfect play. And if it's not for one of the 1,300 wide receivers that they pass to per game, it's going to be Travis Kelce, who I don't understand how he is always so wide open on every route. It
He had
behooves
nearly
me.
3 times more yards of offense than the Broncos had, like total,
Yeah,
or passing yards for Russ. Russ had 37 passing yards, and Kelsey had over 100 yards in the first half receiving. So
yeah. Like Russell Wilson ended up having a 46.6 passer rating. I mean, I'm not sure how Mahomes ended up having a 99.4 passer rating, but I mean, that's the thing I'm talking about is Mahomes has had some pretty bad interceptions and some pretty bad plays the past couple weeks. Not sure if he's just trying to like force the ball to Kelsey too much, or if it's just
I think that's what it is.
yeah. I mean, but like even some of the throws that he's more accustomed to making, like pinpoint accurate passes down the field, he's underthrowing people. He's directly throwing it to the defense, and but I think it's again one of those things where he's just testing things out as opposed to being more cautious with the ball. But I do think that the loss of Eric Bieniemy is really kind of showing its trueness here, as they're not able to move the ball as efficiently as we've been accustomed to the past few years. So
Definitely. I think people thought that the Chiefs offense was, going to continue what it was last year. Last season, people were like, oh, okay, this is where the Chiefs offense is going to kind of slow down because of the loss of Tyreek Hill. But it really seemed like, losing Eric Bieniemy seems to be more of a bigger loss than people would have gave it credit for, because people were saying, oh, Andy Reid is actually the one calling the plays and things like that. And Eric Bieniemy, I don't think, got the respect that he really deserved. And now that he's with the Commanders, and the Commanders aren't necessarily the best team, people still aren't giving him that credit. But I think he's been really extremely undervalued. So I agree with you. I think the Chiefs are going to be fine. And it is a little bit concerning with Patrick Mahomes, the way he's been playing. I think it's because he doesn't necessarily trust all of his receivers other than Travis Kelce. As you mentioned, he's had a lot of picks and turnovers. He had the 2 last week against the Jets. He had one this last Thursday, and he potentially could have had two or three total. He had one that ended up getting called back because of a pass interference, and then one that the Broncos defense just ended up dropping. But ultimately, I do think the Chiefs are going to be fine. Their schedule does pick up coming here midway through the season. They have the Chargers next week, then they have the Broncos again, but then they have the Dolphins and the Eagles back-to-back weeks. So I think that'll answer a lot of questions that people have for the Chiefs. So moving on, we do have some injury updates. I feel like the biggest one of note is going to be Justin Jefferson, who ended up injuring his hamstring against the Chiefs in their game last week and has now been placed on IR. Drew, what are your thoughts on the Justin Jefferson injury and expectations for the Vikings? I think they're 1-5 as well, so they're not doing too much.
Yeah, so this injury is actually a little bit more interesting than the Cooper Cup situation, because this is thought to be a similar injury as the Cooper Cup injury. However, with this case,
Mhm.
it's looking like it's going to be a potentially 4 week process to up to 8 week process. But at the same time, they said that they might not even bring him back this season, because they are 1-5, and they're at that point in their season where they're trying to make that decision of, do we even have a chance this year, or should we just tank for Caleb Williams kind of thing, and move on from Kirk Cousins and just get rid of him as well too.
Right.
So there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts out there, and a lot of question marks that need to be answered. But ultimately, I, if Justin Jefferson, he's obviously going to come back, I think, but it's probably going to be closer to that 8 week mark as opposed to the 4 week mark, because there's no reason to even rush back from this injury, especially because it's a soft tissue injury and potential to get worse, as the if he rushes it back too soon. So, yep.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the Vikings aren't going to rush him back at all. He was in line to sign arguably the largest contract in NFL history from a wide receiver perspective, but a lot of reports came out and said one of the reasons that he didn't sign yet in the offseason was because he wanted to see what the offense was going to look like, and he wanted to see if, Kirk Cousins was going to be able to be a great quarterback for him long term.
Hmm.
So I think that the Vikings are probably going to move off of Kirk Cousins this year. But where do you go from that? Because I mean, I don't think that they're going to be like, one of the worst teams in the league, just because I think they're going to have a good offense and they are going to eventually win some games, even with Justin Jefferson now. But, free agency wise, I'm not even exactly sure who you could go after other than that's going to be better than Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins is a very solid quarterback, and he doesn't always show up in the biggest moments. He has like one of the worst primetime records, along with along with the Giants quarterback. But I
Daniel
think
Jones,
that
yeah.
Daniel Jones, I think that it's going to be a weird process. So he's obviously on IR, so he's out for 4 weeks. And again, they're not going to rush him, so it's probably going to be closer to that 6 to 8 week situation, as you said. So potential for Jordan Addison to make a late push for Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's already had a good season so far, so he could possibly be the number one guy. See how that looks when he is the main point of emphasis for defenses and things of that nature. But we are wishing Justin Jefferson a speedy recovery. Additional injury update: we have Austin Eckler, who had been dealing with his high ankle sprain and had been out since week 1. He is now been a full participant in practice and is expected to be a full go. What were your thoughts on Austin Eckler, Drew? Do you feel like he's going to be 100%? And do you have any concern for potential re-injury? Travis Kelce, we didn't really mention that, but he kind of retweaked his ankle that he had heavily taped up because he had the ankle injury from last week as well.
Yeah, so high ankle injuries, usually when they come back, they're pretty solid, but there is a slight dip in production. So look for that if you're planning to play him this week in fantasy. Obviously, if you have Austin Eckler, you got to play him, but limit your expectations for him. Um, One thing, though, to make note of is whenever Austin Eckler goes out on injury, or for an injury, and then he comes back, he's very good about understanding when he's actually ready to go. And he lets the team know when he's actually 100%. He never rushes back from injury, and he always comes back when he's ready to go. So if he comes back this week, I wouldn't expect him to be at as high of a risk of re injury as some of the other players would be for this injury. So,
I agree with you. Austin Eckler has been known to be a very intellectual player and pound for pound one of the strongest players in the league. So I think that he is going to be good to go. Saquon Barkley with his high ankle sprain is questionable for this week. We have a few more. I'm just going to go rapid fire on them. If you want to know any of them, just let me know. So we have Saquon. We have T. Higgins, who had his fractured ribs, was out last week and is questionable for this week. We have Deshaun Watson, who's already been ruled out and is potentially a candidate for IR with a rotator cuff contusion. Did you have any thoughts on that, Drew? Apparently, he's going to be out this week and potentially be out even longer.
yeah, this was a weird injury too, because apparently Stefanski was saying that he's been healthy and ready to go, and ready to play, but then he's just been out. So there's kind of
Yeah, they've really
some
been underplaying it.
yeah, so there's these two sides of the story that's going on here. Obviously, I'm not saying that, Deshaun Watson is kind of milking it a little bit and, oh, actually I can't really go, even though he's been medically cleared. But I mean, it's kind of weird that he threw one pass last Saturday and then immediately was off the field. And then he was like, "Nah, I'm good to go. Like I'll be out there on Sunday." And then next thing you know, DTR is out there, running for his dear life, and just getting blown up in the backfield. So and then you advance another week and everything, um, and then you have a longer period of healing time for him, and yet he's still just on or going to IR now because it progressed and got worse. So for him to say, "Yeah, I'll be able to play," and then, "Oh, actually, no, it's really nothing. Like I'm good," and then for Stefanski to be like, "Yeah, he was medically cleared to play, but then he's going on IR." I mean, like your guess is as good as mine on that one. So
Right. Still hasn't been confirmed. He is just ruled out for Sunday's game. Still hasn't been confirmed. They said that he may miss more time. Hasn't been put on IR yet, but that is a potential possibility. We have Khalil Herbert, who is on IR with an ankle sprain for the Chicago Bears, so he's going to be out. So Roshan Johnson was still questionable coming into this game, but looks like he's going to be the RB1 for that team when and if he does come back this week. We have Jahmyr Gibbs, who has been ruled out again this week with his hamstring injury. Very unfortunate, but as a result, David Montgomery has really stepped up and has been an elite RB1 for the Detroit Lions. So that's been kind of one of the news and notes when it comes from the RB perspective this season. And then lastly, we have Mike Evans, who had been dealing with his hamstring injury. They went on bye last week, and now he is expected to be a full go for the Bucs. So any more thoughts or final notes on injury updates, Drew?
yeah, I have this one note for high ankle sprains when it comes to Khalil Herbert. So per
Mm-hmm.
Edwin Porras on Twitter, usually when it comes to high ankle sprains, you either miss no time or you miss 3 games. So if you have Khalil Herbert on your team, or if you're just a Bears fan, I'm sorry, first of all. But then second of all, uh, um, mitigate your expectations on when he's going to come back. So if he's missing this week, expect him to miss probably 2 more games going forward. Because as we said before on previous episodes, this is one of those injuries that if you have a any damage to that those bones right there and that ligament that's holding the 2 bones in your leg together, that's very painful anytime you take a step, and especially when you're cutting and moving. And I mean, if you're playing in the NFL, it's going to be a very cumbersome injury to try and play through. So
Definitely, definitely. So he is on IR. So we're wishing all these players speedy recoveries. Moving on to some of the Week 5 game recaps that we had. I think the first one of note that we're going to get into is, one of Drew's number one team from his power rankings last year. It was the Bills versus the Jags in the London game. I don't know if there's something in the water over in London and Europe that the Jags like, but they are now 2-0 this week against teams in London. They beat the Falcons the week before, and they beat Josh Allen and the Bills. I'll give you the first crack at it, Drew. What were your overall thoughts on this game?
okay, this was just a bad spot, like scheduling wise, for the Bills in general. So I
Mm,
had zero expectations for them to win this game, to be honest. Um, Granted, they should have probably won this game. But the ultimate
no,
thing
they
that
shouldn't have.
what ultimately,
Mm,
yeah, they should have won this game. Um, the main reason why they ended up not losing this game, or not winning this game, was because of all the injuries that they had on defense. Josh Allen
it's
actually
true.
balled out on offense, minus like the one interception that he had. But other than that,
Mm,
like he had a pretty solid game. This game was kind of weird too because a lot of the players in the game kind of went off a little bit. Like everybody had like pretty decent days. Like if you look at the stat line and everything, but then the score didn't really reflect like that high of scoring. Um, and then on the other side of it was going back to the scheduling portion of this. Jacksonville had already been in London for 2 weeks. This is the second week that they were there, so they were sitting there waiting for the Bills, and they had already acclimated and everything. The Bills flew out not on Monday, not Tuesday, not Wednesday, not Thursday, but Friday, and
mm-hmm.
like that's not enough time for somebody to acclimate to a time zone that's what, I don't know, like 5 hour difference from New York. So like
Right.
I don't know. I feel like it's just a really bad scheduling spot for them in general. And then they all, not only that, but also coming off of a big win in the division against the Miami Dolphins. It was just like almost too easy to for the Jacksonville Jaguars, which is a little bit of a preview for one of my picks later on a team that may or may not have left a little late for their game this weekend. So
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Both of us expected the Bills. I expected the Bills are the better team, so I did expect them to win this game. Even coming into Jacksonville, we had talked about the little gamesmanship that the Bills had, and
mhm.
when it comes to uh, their hotel and things like that. But this is exactly what I was talking about when it comes to Josh Allen and the Bills when it comes to their volatility. And yeah, like you said, the numbers look good at the end of the game. Josh Allen finished with 360 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, and the 1 pick. But a lot of those were in garbage time. Not necessarily, I wouldn't say it's garbage time, but a lot of them were very late in the game. So the Bills started off their possession wise. They started punt, 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 punt. Then they got a touchdown, go into halftime, punt, punt, interception. And then we're basically midway through the fourth quarter. That's when Josh Allen starts leading that comeback. And then they end up obviously losing 25-20. Granted, the Bills did deal with a lot of injuries. You had Milano that got hurt. Now he's out in IR. You had one of their D tackles got hurt. Von Miller came back and he got hurt. So I do understand a lot of the circumstances with injury and with the Bills traveling with the Jags already being there in London. But I think that just goes to show the volatility of this team and is one of my main concerns for the Bills, who now fall to the 7th overall within the AFC. I still have complete confidence that they're going to make the playoffs and they could potentially go decently far in the playoffs, but I do have some concerns for the Bills. It seems like when their expectations are high, they came off the big win against the Dolphins and stuff like that, so they kind of just laid an egg against the Jags. Trevor Lawrence was solid. Only had 1 touchdown, 315 yards, but Travis Etienne, as you mentioned, some of the players, he went off for 26 carries for 136 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I think that could possibly be because of the Bills and their lack of defensive options because they got hurt. But overall, I think that the Jags stayed with the Bills. They're very competitive, and I feel like they could, potentially be a good team going forward. That was my team to win their division and to make the playoffs, but we'll have to see when it comes to the Bills and Jags and stuff like that. But I do have the concerns about the Bills and Josh Allen, Drew. This is exactly where it comes from.
This
Games
is
like this.
I'm not concerned at all. Like this kind of game happens every year to any good team. Like nobody was concerned when the Chiefs were losing games to mediocre teams. Nobody was concerned when the Patriots were
Yeah,
losing
because
games. Like,
because the Chiefs and Patriots have won Super Bowls
well, yeah,
and they've shown it. The Bills have not. They have
I'm
not
not
been to a
concerned.
Super Bowl.
I'm not concerned.
Okay. 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 They do have a very easy schedule up until basically a little further midway through the season. So they have a bounce back opportunity against the Giants. Then they face the Patriots. Then they face the Bucks, Bengals, Broncos, Jets, and then they get to the Eagles eventually. So I think that they could go on a nice little win streak here. Probably go 6-0 potentially if they could beat the Bucks and beat the Bengals. So I'm not exactly too concerned about their ranking and things like that. I still think they're going to probably finish easily winning the division over the Dolphins. And I'm not too concerned, but for the elite teams and teams that I expect to make the AFC Championship and make the Super Bowl, they probably are going to be a tier below, which is why I had other teams ahead of them and why I had concerns about them. But anyway, moving on for a game that has a team that I also had concerns about. It was the 49ers versus the Cowboys. So the 49ers absolutely destroy the Cowboys as I win my bet against Drew, and I'll be taking that tea time next time you're in town, or vice versa. But the 49ers end up being the Cowboys 42-10. Good old ass whooping. Brock Purdy has 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and is can't really deny it anymore. Potential MVP candidate this year.
Okay,
Dak
no,
and
stop it,
hey, okay. Let's
dude.
be serious. Let's
Yeah,
be honest. Let's
let's
be
be
honest.
serious. Like, dude, he's not.
Why would he not be a potential MVP candidate? People were saying that obviously C-Mac would be the MVP candidate on that team because of what he's been doing. He's had a touchdown in, I think, 15 consecutive games for the 49ers. But Brock Purdy has been great. And as much as you talk about the Cowboys and their vaunted defense, he just shredded them. So what more do you want from him?
I mean, it's not really what I want from him. It's a how do I put this? I don't want to. I don't want to say, I don't want to fall into that category of like, oh, put him in a different offense or whatever, because like that's not realistic, and I don't really like those
Mm-hmm.
arguments because then it's like, he was made for this kind of scheme, and that's why they have him on that team, and that's why he's producing the way he is. But at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, like there's been a lot of plays that he's had where he's either underthrowing players, or he's thrown it directly to other defenses, but then they just end up dropping it. Um, like I don't know. I don't get me wrong. Like I'm really high on the 49ers this year. But at the same time, um, I don't know. It's just maybe I'm falling into the trap of like Mr. Irrelevant. Like there's no way like he can keep doing this kind of
Yeah.
thing. But at the same time, I just like I watch him play and stuff, and he has a lot of really great throws and a lot of elite plays. But at the same time, I still see those flaws that pop up every now and then, but they haven't ultimately turned into turnovers just yet. Um, but who am I to say? Because like he hasn't lost a game that he's finished. So I mean, that is what it
Yeah.
is.
I think it's, maybe, and I done the same thing. After this game, I was like, okay, I kind of have to, give him the potential to be an MVP candidate. Kind of looking at it through filter glasses, obviously, he's Mr. Irrelevant, last pick in the draft, not high expectations and things like that. Ended up going like 7-0 last season, and then was undefeated in the playoffs up until he got hurt. And people are like, okay, let people defense get a whole offseason, get tape on him, stuff like that. But he's doing the exact same thing. And I understand he's in a great offense with Kyle Shanahan and has in a great amount of weapons, but we've also seen other quarterbacks like Jimmy Garoppolo and other players that did not look this good because they were turnover prone. I think the fact that he's been able to take care of the ball along with his touchdowns, he hasn't had crazy yardage or isn't throwing for these miraculous passes like Mahomes or Allen, or throwing for crazy yards like Tua, but he's consistently scoring, he's consistently moving the ball, he's taking care of the ball overall, and that's exactly what he did in this game. So from the opposite end of the side, you got Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. Dak only had 150 yards, one touchdown, ended up throwing for 3 interceptions, and they didn't get to the red zone once. His one touchdown was a little bit outside the red zone. They didn't get to the red zone once the entire game. And this goes to show my concerns for the Cowboys going forward when they actually have to face teams with a good defense and a good offense, and you need Dak to actually go out and win you a game. This is more times than not the reality that you get.
Yeah, you know, um, I wish I could say anything positive to take away from this game, but there's literally like I can't think of a single thing that I can take away from this and be like, oh yeah, well they still got this, that, and the other. Um, because I mean, okay, one thing that we can take away from this is that they were playing like the arguably the best defense in the league. Um, and
Yeah,
like that's kind of what happens when you go against them. But also a lot of those passes that Dak was throwing were like kind of like look away
those were
kind
some
of
bad
thing, like
passes.
hide the wife and kids, because this is going to get ugly kind of thing. But Dak said he's not going to throw double digit interceptions this year. But I mean, my guy is already
Sure
at,
about that?
yeah, he's already at 4 interceptions this year. So um, I don't know. It's yeah.
I'm not ready to, over exaggerate or anything like that. I've heard people talking about like, the Cowboys potentially not going to make the playoffs and all that kind of stuff. I think that's, that's unrealistic. I think they're still a
Mhm.
good team. They're going to make the playoffs. I just think that when the season started, when you looked at the NFC, you had three teams that you thought were kind of a tier above everybody else. That was the 49ers, the Eagles, and the Cowboys. I think now we kind of have to accept that the 49ers and Eagles are in a different tier than the Cowboys, who may be kind of similar in the line of, the Seahawks, the Lions, and then maybe the Cowboys, something like that. Maybe in that tier as opposed to the elite teams within the NFC.
Yeah, currently on Pro Football Focus right now, Dak Prescott is currently ranked as the 20th quarterback in the league, out of players that have played 50% of 250 snaps, which is the maximum amount of snaps that a quarterback has played so far. So, 125, quick math. Anyways, he is currently 20th. Only players that are below him, listen to this list: Derek Carr, Sam Howell, Josh Dobbs, Jordan Love, Mac Jones, Daniel Jones, Zach Wilson, Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ritter, Bryce Young. that's not
Elite.
that's not a company that you want to be in. So I mean, even even Justin Fields is ahead of him right now. That and we know how we feel about him in passing the ball. So
Right.
it is quite concerning. They switched it over. They switched their offense over to the I think they called it like the Texas Coast offense or whatever, trying to like a
Yeah, it's kind of
like a
rude.
yeah, kind of like a version of the West Coast. I don't know. Whatever it is, it's not
Mm-hmm.
working. It's clearly a way to try and mitigate Dak from having to uh, make his own decisions. They're trying to turn it into a Kyle Shanahan offense to where they just have like a one read to make, and then if they're not open, okay, second read, boom, open, and then it's all based on timing and stuff too. The problem with that is when your quarterback tries to do a little bit more than what they're asked, you end up getting a lot of turnovers and you end up getting bad Dak instead of good Dak. Pause. And so that's one of those things that I think is going to be the ultimate demise of the Cowboys is if they can't get this offense going, then they're not going to really have any hope with the mounting injuries that they're having on their defense too. So
Yeah, I think it all boils down to Dak. I think that he has good weapons. I think he has better weapons than he had last year with the addition of Brandon Cooks, and you still have CD, who hasn't really been able to get the ball to. He had one good game with CD, and that's basically it. Same thing with Tony Pollard. We had a lot of high expectations for Tony Pollard coming into this season just due to his versatility and like his electricity, and we really haven't been able to see that outside of week one. So hopefully the Cowboys can get things back on the right track. I think that this upcoming game that they have against the Chargers will tell me a lot, because up until this point they've only beat bad teams, and when they've had to go up against one good team, they lost, and when they had to go up against a solid offense in the Cardinals, they lost. So I think that going against the Chargers and even against the Rams next week will be able to tell me a lot, because I view the Chargers and Rams kind of similarly. I think they have good offenses with okay defenses, and see how the Cowboys respond in that situation right before they have to face the Eagles after those 2 weeks. So I don't have high expectations for them in that game, but against the Chargers and Rams, I think that'll tell me a lot going
mhm,
forward with it comes to the Cowboys.
definitely.
Moving on, just a few games again that happened last week. If you want to talk any more about them, let me know. We had the Bengals getting on track against the Cardinals. Joe Burrow remembered that he is still him, and started that reconnection with Jamar Chase. I think he had 19 targets to Jamar Chase with like 15 receptions, 100+ yards, 3 touchdowns. So they got things back on the right track, and now they look. If T. Higgins can come back healthy, it seems like the offense can get back to the expectations that we had for it at the beginning of the season. We have the Eagles, who can remain undefeated as they won this weekend against the Rams with Cooper Kupp coming back. And again, goes to show that what we expected when it came to Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, both of them ended up having very good days in fantasy. Cooper Kupp had more of the volume, but Puka Nacua ended up getting that touchdown, so they both had around 20 fantasy points. Had the Dolphins going 4-1 in their win over the Giants. The Packers, one thing that I kind of wanted to get into, started off 2-0 to start the season, and now they are 0-3, and they just lost to the Raiders. So I think it kind of just goes to show the highs and the lows of a first-year quarterback. Obviously, Jordan Love has been in the league for a long time, being behind Aaron Rodgers as he hadn't gotten his shot yet. And now, people are ready to crown him after the first 2 weeks as the next hot young quarterback. Pause. But after going 0-3, I think he just kind of shows the struggles that he has. So any thoughts on Jordan Love and the Packers? I believe, weren't they one of your teams that you thought they were going to squeak into the playoff as a wild card, which is still a potential possibility now that the Vikings are pretty much out of that scenario. So it'll basically be between the kind of like the Packers and teams within the NFC South, like the Bucks, the Saints, whatever that ends up coming down to.
Yeah. So, I this is another one of those teams, just like the Cowboys, and also, well, okay. So with the Broncos, I didn't really have high expectations for them, but I did kind of think that they would be somewhat decent. But then that ended up not happening. But as far as they go, and as far as the Cowboys go, I'm jumping ship. I'm on full tilt. I'm not gonna lie. I, I
Said man overboard. I'm out with the Cowboys and the Packers, or just the Packers?
with both. In terms of
Okay.
competing for their division, yeah, like I'm jumping ship.
Yeah.
I don't think that the Cowboys have what it takes to compete with the Cowboys with the Eagles. Like I thought they might
Mm-hmm.
this year. I mean, that's also a product of some of the injuries that they had. And then I thought that, the regression monster would come back in a positive way for Dak, but it's not. It's hanging out down there and skewing a lot of the data. But
Mm-hmm.
same thing with Jordan Love too. Like, you know, some of the games you can say, oh well, it's not on him, like their defense let them down or whatever. This was one of those games where their defense actually like played their hearts
Yeah.
out, honestly. Like, to if you're limiting Hopkins, well, that's a that's a story for another time, but because or Hopkins,
Adams.
Adams, yeah, because I don't understand why they're not just passing the ball every single time. It makes zero
He
sense.
came in hurt. He had a shoulder injury.
I don't care if that man has one arm.
They,
I'm passing him the ball.
they had been hyper targeting him prior to that, but he was
Yeah,
very questionable coming in with a shoulder injury.
that is fine. 4 targets is not enough for
Jacoby
your best
Myers ended
player.
up going off.
Yeah, I like that for my fantasy team. But regardless, Jordan Love, like I said in the last list before, where he ranks in comparison on Pro Football Focus for quarterbacks and quarterback ratings.
Mm.
Jordan Love is currently 23rd, only above Mac Jones, Daniel Jones, Zach Wilson, Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ritter, Bryce Young. That's not good
Yeah,
company
he's
to be
looking
in.
bad.
And like people are always using that stat. Oh, well, look at his ADOT, his average depth of target. Like it's one of the best in the league. Okay, that's great and everything, but like if you're doing that, like he's currently number one in the league when it comes to ADOT at 10.2. But I mean, it's one thing to just launch the ball down the field to nobody, or always incompleting those passes. It's another thing to
Mm.
be throwing those bombs and actually completing those. So obviously, when it comes to adjusted passer rating and everything like that, like they correct for those kind of things. For like obviously you're supposed to have a lower um, uh, completion percentage when you throw it further down the field, so it adjusts for that. But at the same time, it's like stop throwing those passes down the field. What there was this podcast I was listening to. They were saying that uh, Matt LaFleur might be too smart for Jordan Love because when he saw there's a video of him running down the field saying throw the ball when they had Christian Watson wide open down the field, and it took Jordan Love like a couple seconds to even realize that he was open down the field to make the pass,
Hmm.
and they compared it to playing the Oregon Trail on a MacBook. so, so
Get there, get there.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, I don't know. Jordan Love, he's there. He's trying. um, but
Yeah, I mean,
I
I think that he's. I
okay.
think he's like a rookie.
Well, okay. I mean, he might be worse than a rookie though, because
I mean,
his adjusted completion percentage, 63.6%, which is the worst in the league. The
yeah,
worst
but I'm gonna
in the
give
league.
him some credit.
The
So, like,
worst
he started
in
off
the
two
league.
and 0, and now he's 0. He started out, now he finished 0-3. So now they're 2-3 total. And a lot of the expectations that people had about these Packers, or the high expectations they had, were because of you know, the youth and the explosivity of the potential team. So you had Jordan Love coming in for his first year, Christian Watson, you had Romeo Dobbs, Jalen Reed, Lucas Musgrave, all young players and things like that. So they had high expectations for them, but it really shows that their lack of maturity. They really don't have that much of veteran presence. They've had a lot of players go in and out of the lineup. You've had Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs, both with hamstring injuries. And they've been out without Aaron Jones, who I would argue is probably their best offensive player. So I can kind of, and AJ Dillon looks kind of like Najee Harris. He kind of just looks slow
Yeah.
at this point. So I think that I am going to give him some credit, and I'm going to cut him some slack. And I'm going to wait to see how it looks when Aaron Jones is actually fully healthy, because I think that he can be very versatile on this offense. As we saw this first game, he went off. He had like a 50-yard receiving touchdown and all that kind of stuff. So I think we have to wait for that. I'm not ready to fully jump off the bandwagon when it comes to Jordan Love and say that he's a bust and they need to move off him and all that kind of stuff. So I think it got to wait. Also, the play that a lot of people were talking about was the Christian Watson play. So he had the deep bomb. Jordan Love kind of saw him a little bit late, so he tried to got going. And I think it was Marcus Peters ended up doing a horse collar tackle
Yeah.
at like the 5 or 6 yard line, which ended up being a great play because even though they called for the penalty, they were able to hold them to a field goal, and they ended up ultimately winning 17-13. So, what were your thoughts on that play? And do you feel that a rule should be changed with that, because that really kind of did halt the Packers in the little momentum that they did end up having? That was a potential 60, 70 yard bomb touchdown, but got
No,
rescinded.
I think that's one of those plays too, where whether or not he actually meant to do that is another thing. Because sometimes he's
It was
just
veteran play. It was
yeah,
smart.
sometimes he's just kind of a head case. So um, I'm not sure if it was on purpose. If it was, then that's good on him. But I think that's one of those things where it's like knowing the rule and using it to your advantage. Like Chris Paul in the NBA, he's done that so many times, and just being
Right.
veteranly savvy about how to get certain calls or how to use certain rules to your advantage. And that's just comes with being in the league for that amount of time. One of the rules that I think that they should change is changing the pass interference to a spot foul, which I think is ridiculous because then you're just rewarding, like I think it was last year or year before that when Carson Wentz, all he would do, this man would just throw it deep down the field. It didn't matter who it was to
Mm-hmm.
just say, okay, run a go route. We need some some yardage, and they would just run a go route, and then he'd purposely underthrow it, and then the receiver would purposely come back into the DB spot foul. Okay, now we got the ball at the 15-yard line. Okay, now we just give it to Jonathan Taylor, and then we just run the ball into the end zone. Like I think that's a ridiculous kind of thing. I think it should be more
How
like
do you
a
solve that though?
well, you just turn it into like a defensive holding call, like where it's like a 15-yard penalty or like a 10-yard penalty, like because it shouldn't just be oh spot foul you automatically get 50 yards like what like that makes that makes no sense.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's really kind of hard to solve that though, because I feel like in those situations, it would work, but like, you do have plays where you have pass interference in the end zone. So it could be a bomb play. So you could be on the 50-yard line, throw a bomb touchdown to the end zone, ends up being a very bad pass interference call, and you only get 15 yards because of that when you probably should be on the 1 yard line. So like in those situations, I feel like that would be my main concern.
Yeah, I mean
But
that's one of those things that that's probably why they have kept the rule is for those kinds of situations. Because
mm,
again, like the veteran savviness of some players, they would just do that and prevent other teams from getting an easy bucket. But that's no different than like doing the Jordan rules on a player in the NBA, just like hacking the crap out of somebody. That way they don't make an easy layup, right? So they still
that's
have
true.
a consequence. So maybe it's like they get I don't know, this is like random number like 25 yards or whatever, or you get like half the distance of whatever the penalty was or something to where it's not 50 yards of of offense that you're gaining for a
Right.
like a play. I guess it's ridiculous, but yeah.
I feel that. I feel that. I feel like the NFL is going to have to relook a lot of the rules. A lot of people were expecting like rules like the brotherly shove to be taken out of the league, but they kept that in and things like that. So I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do with that.
Mhm.
Moving on, I feel like the last game of note that I really wanted to touch on was the Steelers versus the Ravens. Ravens were a very solid favorite. Obviously, it was a divisional game, but Ravens were still a clear favorite in order to win this game. The Steelers ended up, pulling off the upset. Lamar Jackson kind of laid an egg. 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, had a few rushing yards, only 240 yards passing total. Kenny Pickett still wasn't all that great, but ended up having the game-winning touchdown to George Pickens late in the game, and the Steelers defense continues to carry them. Ended up having the blocked punt for the safety, and they've honestly been great and are the reason that they're 3-2. So coming into this season, I chose the Browns to finish last in this division because I had so much respect for Mike Tomlin never having a losing season. The worst he's been is 8-8 as a coach. So I think that just goes to show the aura of Mike Tomlin as a head coach and the greatness of the Steelers defense, who, I don't think Kenny Pickett is the answer, but I think that they still are a solid team with them. And I was really disappointed by the Ravens in this situation, though. There are times where the Ravens, I guess, similar to the Bills, when they have high expectations or they're expected to win games, they end up laying eggs like this. So, what were your overall thoughts on the game? And do you have any concerns for the Ravens, who a lot of people had going pretty far in the playoffs this year as well, with Lamar Jackson and his increase in weapons? Even though Odell's been very injury prone and hurt and got like called out by their DB and got called old and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, Lamar Jackson has been like pretty bad this year. Like all things considering, his expectations going into the season of like, oh, we're gonna throw the ball over the yard and everything, and we're gonna be a high powered offense, da da da, all these things, and like all it's really turned into is Lamar Jackson turning over the ball at one of the higher rates that he's ever turned over the ball. He's throwing for more interceptions, fumbling the ball way more often. He's carrying the ball like a loaf of bread. Like it's
4 interceptions, 6 turnovers this
yeah,
season.
and I mean it's one of those things that you would think getting the ball into his hands would help the team win, but it's actually doing quite the opposite. Is when you have Lamar Jackson back there this year, it's almost like a 50-50 chance that you might give the other team the ball. And for a former MVP to be playing at this kind of a level is kind of um, peculiar, we'll say. But at the same
Got his
time,
bag.
yeah, exactly. So, uh, but I think it's one of those things too where he again is playing with basically not really any real direction in the offense, and it's also a new offense that he's not familiar with. So a lot of the players aren't on the same page as him. But then he's also making some just terrible passes, like literally like middle school like passes to some of his players. Like he just floats it out there and is like, ah, oh, damn, my bad, and it's like 30 feet underthrown to a wide open player in the end zone, and then it gets picked off. So I, the Steelers had no business winning this game. Let's be honest; like they had no business winning this
Right.
game. And
Agreed.
and this is just one of those games that I think they're going to bounce back this week. Honestly, going out over to London, but I don't know. It's just weird because you're like, okay, this isn't the Ravens that we're accustomed to. This isn't really them. They'll bounce back. And then they do the same thing the next week, and the next week, and you're like, well, now this is week 6. Like this is who they are at this point. So
Yeah, very up and down. I do think that they're going to bounce back in London against the Titans, as you mentioned. Going back to, I talked about his 4 touchdowns, 4 passing touchdowns. He additionally also does have 4 rushing touchdowns. We know that Lamar Jackson is very versatile and a great runner of the football. But yeah, some of the turnovers have just been very head scratching. It's just been bad overall. So, they face the Titans this week and then they go against the Lions, which I feel like is going to be a very big matchup for them. And I think I probably would favor the Lions in that game, to be quite honest with you. And obviously, they lost J.K. Dobbins and stuff. They've always basically been able to kind of plug and play when it comes to the running back just because of their zones and scheming when it comes to the way that they run the football and the versatility of Lamar Jackson for a QB option and things of that nature. But, I don't know. I kind of want to give him credit, but then I don't. Mark Andrews came into the season banged up. Odell Beckham wasn't what we expected to be. Bateman hasn't been all that great. Zay Flowers has been basically the big note when it comes to receivers for a very promising rookie. But overall, I think the Ravens have just shown a lot of inconsistency, and I still would I don't know. I'm still not exactly completely sold on the Bengals when they came back. I understand they had the good game last week, but I'm still not exactly sure, especially with T Higgins out, on who I would choose to win this division. But right now, it would probably be a toss up for me. What about you? Who do you still feel that the Ravens are going to be the favorite to win the division? I think the Bengals are 1 game back now because they're 2-3.
I mean, I think it's if Joe
Like it's a
Burrow,
toss up.
well, see that's the thing is like if Joe Burrow is healthy, um, I think it's the Bengals, no doubt. But
mm,
it's weird because like one week, his leg is like, oh man, my leg is really bothering me, and it showed. But then the next week or the week after that, you're like, you try and give him the benefit of the doubt. Okay, his legs, hurt and stuff, and then it shows. And then the next week, you're like, okay, well now his leg. We know what it is. And then he goes out and balls out, and he's like, actually, no, I'm good, bro. Like he was taken off the injury report and everything, and people are like, that's weird. Like he still has that calf thing going on, because those things don't just like heal overnight, especially if you're playing during the season. It's going to linger for sure.
yeah.
Um, but I mean, you know, they,
I don't know.
they
We'll have to wait and see on that one. The
yeah,
Ravens do have the early tiebreaker against the Bengals as they won in week 2, so they don't play again until week 11. So that would basically be a must win for the Bengals, probably for seeding purposes in order for the tiebreaker when it comes to the division and playoffs. So we'll just have to wait and see with that. So I think we're gonna move on from that. I don't think we have any more games of note that we wanted to touch on. So now we are going to get into some preview games for this upcoming week, week 6. Drew, do you have any games that you have that are looking at, or potentially if you want to get straight into your game props, call your shots?
Yeah, real quick before I get into that, I'm looking right now on DraftKings, and the Ravens are currently the favorite to win the AFC North at plus 125. And then the Bengals are currently tied with the fourth shot on the board at plus 400, along with the Steelers, who are also at plus 400. So Vegas clearly thinks
Interesting.
that they don't have much of a chance to win the division. I personally think that plus 400, them having the same odds as the Steelers, is kind of crazy to me, because they're definitely two teams on different levels. So I mean, honestly, that might, I might even make that one of my call your problems. I'm just looking at that right now.
Yeah,
But
if Burrow's healthy and fully past the calf injury, and T Higgins comes back, and their offense is able to get clicking on all cylinders, along with the Browns now without Deshaun Watson, and I just I don't see the Steelers going anywhere. I think it was a great win, great start to the season, 3-2, but I still don't think they're a good football team. So I would take that honestly too, Bengals. So going forward, so yeah, week 6, what do you got?
So week 6, this is one of the weeks where this week and last week are both two of the weeks where we can kind of start taking the data from this season, and really projecting it out for the rest of the season, as opposed to taking some data from last season and trying to navigate what that's going to look like for this season. So, with that being said, my first pick is going to be against my own team. I am
Yep.
taking the the Texans to beat the Saints. I'll take the money line on this one. Um, so last week, obviously, the Titans ended up losing a heartbreaker to the Falcons, who I also had, which is why I told you I am taking the money line and not the not the spread, because it ended up landing on 2 instead of 3. So I would have ended up losing that bet. So
I mean, I'm confident in all my picks. All my picks,
okay,
I'll take the spread. So I'm just
okay.
saying, you do you though. You do
No,
you.
I will. I will. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I am taking uh, the Texans in this game. Stroud has looked amazing, and he still is yet to throw an interception. That might change this weekend, but
I would say I think that might change.
at the same time, though, I'm not concerned. And on top of that, this is a contrarian play as well. Just like how we had last week, we're getting a lot of the bets on the Saints this week, but also the Texans are more than likely going to end up covering this game because of their. This is a letdown spot for the Saints, coming off of a large blowout win of 21 points or more. And usually you look to fade those teams the next week, and this is just a
Which I
smash
called.
spot. Okay, I mean, I a blind man and like a deaf person could have called
The
this
spread
game
was
before
only
even
like
knowing
3
what was going on.
against the Patriots. It was only like
I know
3.
that was ridiculous. Like, I, I mean, I feel like at this point you basically have to play against the Patriots as well until further notice, because all of the trends that were like, oh, Bill Belichick has never lost to this, or Bill Belichick this, Bill Belichick that, like that, all of those stats need to be thrown out the window, burned, and put in a bonfire, because like those.
Worst 2 losses of his career, back to back.
I mean, the Saints are an elite offense though too. That team is just
You should
dominant.
be.
Yeah, but then we
I
have
don't know what
Derek
you guys
Carr
are
back
doing.
there, so. Um, But yep, that's my pick right there. And then along with that pick, I'm also going to take the under 42 in this game. This is one of those things, just like how we had with any of the Saints games, limiting their teams to under 20 points. Even though I love the Texans in this spot, I don't think that they're going to have a high productive or high offensive output game. I think it's going to be a low grinded out kind of game. A lot of short dink and dunk passes for the Texans, but which ultimately will come to fruition for them to win the game. So
It's a little surprising. I thought that when you brought up the game, I thought it was going to be a clear pick for the Saints, not just because of your homer pick being your team, but just I thought that you would have higher expectations for the Saints. I'm so confused with this offense because I feel like it should be very versatile. I don't know if things just haven't been clicking since, well, it hasn't really been that great all year, but once Alvin Kamara came back and how they kind of integrated him with the offense, Chris Olave started the season averaging nearly 100 yards a game for the first 3 weeks. And now that since Alvin Kamara's come back over the past 2 weeks, he has 1 reception for 4 yards and 2 receptions for 12 yards. So
Mm.
he got a touchdown last week, but that's about it. So I'm not exactly sure. I thought that Derek Carr in this system would be able to kind of spread the ball around with the weapons of Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, the tight ends, Alvin Kamara. Now that he's back, I think you just have a surplus of weapons, and they're, I would say, better than what he'd had last year, even though he had Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs. It was still a pretty good offense last year for them with the Raiders. So I thought Derek Carr would be able to kind of thrive in this offense. I do have a little bit of concern with the Houston Texans. I think the Saints may be able to get some good or get pressure on Stroud, who is still one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league. So that would be my main concern. Plus the Saints and their rush defense, as Dameon Pierce hasn't looked that great this season, and has, yards per game have been really way down, especially compared to last year and what people had expectation wise for Dameon Pierce coming into this season. But, I'm not going to knock your pick. If that's your pick, take it. You're taking a little spread, not taking your spread thing again, but, I digress. My first pick would be
Real
the
quick,
Eagles. You
real
said what?
quick. So one of the things too, along with Stroud getting sacked like pretty much at just about the highest rate in the NFL at this point, is they're getting a lot
Mm,
of their offensive linemen back and healthy, especially Larry Tunsil. That's going to be
that's true.
the biggest thing for them, is having big old Larry Tunsil, protecting his blind side there for him. And even with that, I mean, the Saints offense really hasn't been doing much, even though Derek Carr, this is another thing about that stat that people always are like, oh, look at his ADOT, like, and everything like that. Derek Carr, average depth of target, 9.5 yards, third in the league. What has it shown? Nothing. Like, literally nothing. Ryan Tannehill, 9.9 yards, average depth of target, nothing. Like, Jordan Love,
I feel
top
like it's
in the
an
league.
overinflated stat.
Yeah, like, this is one of those things where people use these particular stats that don't have any correlation to really anything productive on the offensive side, but it helps embellish their argument. And then also going back to the PFF grades, um, Derek Carr is below Dak Prescott, so that's all you really need to know about about that there. So
Oh, you hate Dak Prescott, bro.
yeah, I don't
That
hate
was supposed
him.
to be your turn. That was supposed to, that was your NFC East winner.
I told you, man. I'm jumping ship. I'm jumping ship,
I'm
man.
already we're only 5 weeks in, Drew. You're
I
ready to
don't care,
concede
man.
the bet already.
I
I don't
I've
care.
seen enough. They are who we thought they were.
But it's not anything different from last year, so I don't know why people's expectations changed.
I don't know, man.
I don't know. Anyway, I digress. Moving on. My first pick would be the Eagles over the Jets. I'm not exactly sure why this line is the way it is. It's 6.5 in favor of the Eagles. So Eagles favored -6.5. So it's less than a touchdown. I understand that the Jets have gotten a couple wins this season. They looked pretty good against the Chiefs a couple weeks ago, and the Eagles haven't looked great. They're 5-0, but they haven't looked dominant in their wins compared to last year. But I think that this is going to be a blowout. To be quite honest with you, I think that the Jets defense is good, but at times they've been able to be exploited and have had points put up on them. And I think the Eagles could do this. I think it'll be a get right game for a lot of the Eagles players. Devontae Smith has been a little lower, and I think that a lot of Sauce Gardner's attention will be on A.J. Brown. So I think, Dallas Goedert, who had a big game last week, Devontae Smith, potentially getting, DeAndre Swift more involved, which has been kind of crazy. He's been kind of one of the stars of the running back pickups as well this season. So overall, I think that the Eagles are a much better team, much better offense, and Zach Wilson is probably going to get lit up a lot. I just don't really have high expectations for them. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball that much, even though the Eagles' run defense hasn't been the greatest. Brees Hall seemed to have got it going over the past couple of weeks, but overall, I just think the Eagles are the better team. So I have pretty confident choosing them -6.5. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like that pick. That was gonna be one of my picks. Honestly, it's one of those things where Zach Wilson wins a game, and then people are like, "Oh my God, guys, it's happening! He's actually not that bad." And then you're like, "Well, actually, he is kind of that bad." And he played against one of, if not the worst team in the league. And so,
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
got to win against the Broncos
yeah, like, so it's uh, any,
and the Bills.
okay, whatever. But yeah, it's one of those things where don't overthink it. Just fade Zach Wilson. Um, Let me see what I have this line at. Because let me see here. Do, do, do.
I was
I,
thinking double digits. There's yeah.
yeah, I have it at 8.5. So I mean, I'd take it up to probably. I'd I'd probably play the alt line up to 8. Get a little plus money action in there, but I
Addict.
okay. I don't think that this game is going to be really all that close, like you were saying too. The one thing too, um, that you were kind of alluding to is, or actually maybe you weren't, but one thing that I'm going to allude to, I guess I should say, is the teams that the uh, that the Jets have really kind of showed up and showed out against this year. Like, oh, they're this elite defense, but actually they're kind of middle of the pack, honestly. They played against
Yeah.
they played against Dallas, who well, we'll ignore Buffalo. Played against Dallas. Um,
Convenient.
yeah, played against Dallas and everything, and we know how we feel about Dallas now, jumping ship. They played against New England, and we see how that went for, or how that's going for Bill Belichick over there this season. They played
Hmm.
against Kansas City. Okay, yeah, they held Kansas City, you know, to one of their few,
24.
yeah, one of their lowest outputs this season with a full allotment of their players. But at the same time, Patrick Mahomes also is third in the league this right now with 9 turnover worthy plays, which is a pass that had potential to be a turnover, but either ended up not being a turnover or ended up resulting in a turnover. So he's currently third in the league, only behind Desmond Ritter and Mac Jones. Not good company to be in, and also just behind Daniel Jones. So um,
Don't you talk about my homeboy and the breath of those.
that's where he is. That's what the stats
I don't
are.
care what the stat is. You don't talk about it.
Okay,
All right.
and then also,
Kiss the ring, goddamn it.
and then also, they played against the Denver Broncos last week. So I'm not ready to crown them as the elite defense that they were last year, because they for sure were an elite defense, but this year I think that they're just kind of, as the kids say, mid.
I feel like that has to do again a lot with the lack of offensive production as well. If your defense has to go up there for a lot more series because your offense can't move the ball, you're eventually going to give up a lot of points. So, I mean,
Mhm.
fair enough. What you got? What's your next game?
So my next game, I alluded to earlier on in the show, and it's going to be the Ravens. So this is one of those things that we saw play out last week, where the Bills didn't end up leaving until Friday, going over to London, and that's the same case this week with the Titans not leaving until Friday for their game this Sunday. Um, it's one of those things where, yeah, it's a spot for the Ravens, that, it's a get right game, just off of a bad loss to a team that they should have beat in the division and everything. And you have the Titans as a dog and everything too. I don't care. This is Harbaugh. He always gets his team going. He always gets his team right. And I have no doubt in my mind that they're going to cover this spread. It's currently at 4.5. I'm okay laying that. It was at 3 earlier in the week, but that's okay. We'll take the bad price and lay that money. I my line currently has it at 7.5, so I'd play it all the way up to that. So.
I agree with you. I would choose the Ravens overall. But, something to have note, different teams at this point in time with, they still have key players that are still there. I just think of about a couple years in the playoffs where the Ravens were the super high favorite with Lamar Jackson coming off his MVP season, and the Titans literally just ran the ball every single time with Derrick Henry, and he single-handedly won them that game. Not saying that has anything to do with this game. And, Derrick Henry seems to have lost a little, maybe half a step, and you kind of have the emergence of his backup Spears, who's actually been a good running back for them too. So they haven't really necessarily used Derrick Henry as much as they have in the past. Also because they haven't really been leading in a ton of games, so they haven't really been leaning on the run. But I agree with you. I would choose the Ravens in this game as well.
Yeah,
I've been
and
going back and forth.
real quick, and one of the things too, one of the reasons why I like them is that the elite defense that the Titans had with their run defense, which made them into a pass funnel, is kind of diminishing a little bit with some of the injuries that they've had over the past couple of weeks. So that's also another reason why I like the Ravens this week. Along with that, like you were saying there, they just hand the ball off to Derrick Henry and then just run the crap out of the ball. That's one reason why I like the under in this game as well. So that's going to be another one of my plays too. So
Definitely got one more London game. Are you getting up for these London games? Are you watching them?
yeah, it ends up being like about 12 hours of uninterrupted football for me. So
I usually wake up like midway through the second quarter.
yeah, I'm a real one. I get up, I grind, and I watch it. All
You
right.
grind to watch your Bills get destroyed by the Jags.
Hey man, like I said, I knew what was gonna happen. Like I wasn't expecting to
I
win
don't
that
remember
game.
you saying that I think we both expected the Bills to win this game. I think if we turn back the tape from
Well, yeah,
last
I
weekend,
mean,
yeah, I think
okay, let me rephrase that. I
okay.
expected them to win, but I didn't expect them
You
to
weren't
win by more
surprised.
than yeah. I was a little surprised. I wasn't expecting them to win by more than 5.5 or whatever the spread was, because it was a really bad spot for them. If anything, I would have probably taken the first half for the Jaguars, but then the Bills for the game. But I mean, they rolled out of bed, and as you saw, they didn't start doing anything productive until later on in the game when they were like, "Oh, actually, we're playing a football game, guys. You guys want to try?" Yeah, sure. And so, little, too late.
Sounds like empty calories to me.
Okay, whatever.
Say it with me, Drew. Josh Allen volatility.
Okay.
It's going to be the word of the month. It's going to be the word of the season. But
Yep.
I'm just like moving on. We talked about it a little bit before the podcast before we got started here. I've going back and forth. I wasn't going to say I'm taking it. I'm taking the Seahawks over the Bengals. Okay, I didn't want to say it out loud because I didn't want to jinx
Seahawks over
anything.
Bengals.
Joe
Huh?
Burrow looks like he's back, and I'm not sure if T Higgins is going to play.
Wow.
Jamar Chase's Megatron and all this kind of stuff. But the Bengals are favored by 3 against the Seahawks, who have looked very good this season, albeit they had the opener loss against the Rams, but they've beaten the Lions, who a lot of people have good high expectations for this season, but they kind of gloss over the fact that Seattle beat the Lions. And they're like, oh, they lost in overtime and stuff like that. Seattle was up by 10 points with like 5 minutes left. They just ended up, just shit in bed and allowing the Lions to come back and send the game into overtime. But it's still a W. So I think that I'm going to choose the Seahawks in this game. Kind of had a weird situation when we went against the Giants a couple weeks ago, which ended up being a blowout as well. Ends up being very common reality when it comes to the Giants. But, had Jamal Adams come back, finally, first game back in seems like years, and immediately gets concussed and then ends up cussing out the neurology specialists and things like that, almost ends up getting fined, all that kind of stuff. But whatever the case may be, I think that the Seattle's defense is going to be able to, slow down Jamar Chase a little bit. I don't think that he's going to have 180 yards for 3 touchdowns this game. Especially with T. Higgins, if he ends up being out with his fractured ribs. Again, I think that we'll be able to hone in a little bit more on Jamar Chase, not saying that we're going to hold him to like 50 yards receiving or anything like that, but be able to temper those expectations. I believe that we're going to be able to move the ball on the Bengals. I think that our weapons, now that we're fully healthy, are going to be able to move the ball. And overall, I think that I'm still I'm going to take the spread too. So we get +3. So I feel like we could just win this game outright. So I would take that too. Win the game outright against the Bengals. So going 4-1 to start the season don't sound too bad to me.
Wow. Just wow. I mean, you really this is Call Your Shot podcast, man, but god
You
damn,
think the
bro.
Bengals are about to blow them out?
I don't think it's going to be close. Like
Okay.
it
So the way we were talking about last week, and we were like 1 week away from basically telling the Bengals to seal it in when it came to the
Yeah,
season and to sit Joe Burrow down. After 1 week, you're basically saying, you know what? Nope. They're Super Bowl bound and everything's been solved. Everything's been fixed. It doesn't matter that Joe Mixon has been hyper inefficient. It doesn't matter that T.
he's always
Higgins has
inefficient.
fractured ribs and is questionable. And it's even been worse this season and is questionable to come into this game. Doesn't matter that Joe
I
Burrow
mean,
is
ribs.
still dealing with the calf just because, like you said, he goes hot and cold. He has one game where it doesn't affect him that much, and he has another game where it bothers him, and all that kind of stuff. So basically, I think this goes back to the point that you just hate the Seahawks. That's what I think,
Okay.
honestly.
No,
To be quite
like
honest with you,
I I don't know. I don't think that the the Seahawks are on the same level when Joe Burrow is playing at his appropriate level. Like Tariq Woolen, talking all this crap and everything about, oh, I'm
yeah,
gonna,
I didn't like
like
that.
poking the bear and everything. So, good luck with that. You saw what happened last week, and he's literally always open. So I'm just saying, I don't think like I don't think it's a it's a good spot for the
We're
Seahawks.
underdogs too. I'll take the +3.
Well, you just play the money line, bro.
I said I would. I said I would. That is the money
Well,
line. We
I'm
are
saying,
underdogs, so
are
we get the
are
+3.
you
I'm saying that
going
I would take it outright as well.
are you going outright or are you going +3?
We are going to beat the Bengals.
Okay, that your money line, all right?
And when we do, I don't want you to
We do.
have any of this talk about like, oh, the calf and all these things and all that kind of stuff. You said it this week. You said that the Bengals are back to their elite selves, even though over the
I
past
know
two
I didn't
seasons,
say
like
that.
they
I
had.
did not say
That's
that.
what you just said. You
No.
said I think that a healthy Bengals team, or basically like a healthy Joe Burrow, is going to basically wax the Seahawks. Is basically what you're saying.
I think that they do have a shot to cover the 3-point spread is all I'm saying. I think that the 3 points is a little short. And
So you
I
think a 2-3 team that's been injury prone and is still dealing with injuries, coming off a team in Seattle that is 3-0 over since they lost their opener and coming off a bye and is as healthy as they've been all year, you think that the spread should be larger in favor of the Bengals than 3,
correct.
even at home?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. You want bet on this game?
What do you want to do for it?
You can do your double or nothing for your tea time since you lost the 49ers Cowboys game.
I'll do dinner. I'll do dinner.
Bro, I'm about to I'm racking
Hey, hey, these
these
tea
events up,
times,
bro.
you can get the junior rate.
They can get a little pricey out there.
Yeah, okay, we can get the junior rate on some of
Thursday
these.
half off, all that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no. Okay, fine. I get my 3 though. I get my 3 though. That's
He
all I'm
said
saying.
money line. He said straight up.
I said money line for the people, not for you. You're not the people.
Okay, I am the people.
You just said that you thought the spread should be worse than 3, so I'm gonna
Well,
get
I
the
mean,
3.
all right, fine.
It's 3 points. All right, I bet the Seahawks beat the Bengals +3. Yep.
Actually, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it.
Okay.
I'm not doing that.
And that's what I'm saying. Over the past 2 seasons, the Bengals have not been the most consistent team. They get it going towards the end of the regular season, and then they make noise in the playoffs, and Joe Burrow steps up in the playoffs. But to start the season and midway through, they kind of just find their form eventually. So that's why I'm glad that we paid them early on in the season as opposed to midway through or towards the end, at least. So there we go. Going into our player props again for you betting folks
there,
out there. Drew, did
bucko.
you have a player? You have another one. You got another one in
I
mind?
got one last one that I'd like to play, and
Okay.
I'd like to do a quick shout out to my boy Matthew Padford, because I am taking the Rams this week. It's the line has
7's a
been.
lot.
I was gonna say the line is pretty inflated here, but like let's be honest.
No James Conner.
Yeah, exactly. So let's be honest. They're going against an Arizona team that was projected to be the worst team in the league. And they had a close game with with a few teams, but at the same time they also have lost all of those games as well. Like they played against Washington, and they ended up keeping it close. So that's great. Okay, then they played against the Giants. We know how bad they are, and they ended up losing and not like not doing anything in the second half. They beat Dallas.
Then who they beat?
They beat Dallas. Okay, that's cute. And then people are like, "Oh, well, they kept it within 21 points of the 49ers. You shouldn't be taking a victory lap of like not losing by 21. They end up still not covering the original spread, which was 14 and a half. And then they ended up losing, getting mollywopped against the Bengals there too. So I'm not going to overthink this one. This line is already shot up from I think like 5 or whatever it opened up at. Um, I don't care how much of a public play this game is. I do not care. The public's actually been doing pretty good this year. I'm taking it. I'm laying the points. Give me the Rams to cover the 7.
Yeah, I mean, I have no lack of confidence that the Rams are going to win this game, but I mean, 7's a lot. But yeah, I would probably agree with you because even though the Cardinals have looked better offensively than we expected coming into the season, they are still 1-4,
Mm-hmm.
and they've lost against some pretty bad teams. Even though they've been formidable against some good teams, they haven't gotten blown out that we expected. They still have not been the greatest, and I think that without James Conner, who has been a pretty solid player for them, I think their backup is DeMercado now or something
Yeah.
like that.
Well, they announced
Um,
that it's the Ingram guy, but he's also not good at
Yeah, but he's
football.
still
So
he's still questionable, and he like has a neck injury and all this kind of stuff. But yeah,
mhm.
still, I don't think that they're anything to write home about. And the Rams' offense has looked borderline elite this season. So now that you have Cooper Cup back fully healthy, you got Puka Nakua, you still got Tutu Atwell, the running game with Kyron Williams. I think that they probably should cover.
Yeah,
I
like this is
I'm a little nervous about the 7 though. Are they at home or away? Are the Rams at home or away?
they're at home. Um,
Okay,
but I
then
mean,
I
and
guess that makes
also
sense.
Sean McVay has owned the Cardinals as well. But one of the things too that's kind of surprising, like we talked about how the Rams were not supposed to be like that great of a team this year too, but currently their
2-3.
offense, yeah, like they're 2-3, but also their offense is uh rated 8th in the league per Pro Football Focus right now. So
That's what I'm saying. They're
um,
borderline elite.
yeah, so like their offense is honestly pretty stacked, especially with Cooper Cup coming back, like you were talking about there. And if you're able to get Kyron Williams running the ball too, like you're checking all the boxes off right now. Um, and then when it comes to uh, like defensive ratings and everything too for the Cardinals, they're sitting down around let's see here 30th in the league. So
Is that
kind of
bad?
yeah, not good, Bob. So like I lay the 7. Don't overthink it.
One quick question: who is the quarterback for that borderline elite offense?
I don't know, some Joe Schmo that picked up off the sidewalk or something.
That's what I thought. I think by
Yeah,
the end of the season, we'll be able to, hopefully you can accept that, Matthew Stafford
except
is better
what
than you give him
I
credit
picked
for.
him up in fantasy.
That he's better than you get credit for. That's what I'm saying. I don't think that you should be able to vote in favor of any games for the Rams. I don't think that you should be able to have any of their players because who's throwing them? I don't even want to get into it. I don't get player props. Player props. I'm starting us off. I don't even want to talk about it. You're gonna get me mad already.
Mm,
The player that I have for this week is going to be Deebo Samuel. His over under for receiving yards is 37.5, so I'm going to take the over in that. They are playing the Browns this week, who have a solid secondary, and as you mentioned, I didn't even really know that it is supposed to be a win game. So, but I think that Debo's still going to be able to get his yardage because they throw him the ball not just down the field, they throw him the ball, at the line of scrimmage, allow him to get the yak, and I believe that's only like 2 or 3 catches for Debo, and I think that he could easily get the 37.5. So that would be my player prop for this week.
Alrighty, I have no quarrels with that pick. I mean
Okay.
they're gonna get what they want on offense because not only like do they just scheme players open, but it's also one of those things too where yeah, the Browns have had a pretty elite defense and like no doubts that they're going to continue to have an elite defense. But at the same time, like we got to look at the quarterbacks that they've been playing against. They played against an injured Joe Burrow. They played against Kenny Pickett. They played against Ryan Tannehill, and they played against turnover prone Lamar Jackson. So not that their defense isn't, that high level, but I'm just saying, like, they might not be nearly as dominant as we are making them out to be. So they're not
Agreed.
the like everybody's like, oh, they're like better than the 85 Bears based on all these stats. Stop it. Like, no. Anyways, my pick is Adam Thielen over 59 and a half receiving yards. Look,
The old man.
yeah, look. The
He's the
they're
number
playing,
one.
I I can't deny it. Yep, he is. It's gross, but they love him out there, so I can't blame them. But yeah, they're playing against the Dolphins this week, and it's not necessarily that the Dolphins have, well, they don't really have the best secondary, but not only that, they are also probably going to get mollywopped in this game. So, oh, the garbage man can. I don't care when he gets the yards, as long as he gets those yards. And if he's getting, what is he getting? Probably like 13 targets this game. Like
Yeah.
he's easily going to get over 59 and a half yards. Like, I'm not sure how that prop ended up getting down that low, um, but I'll take it easily.
Yeah. Playing against the Dolphins, gonna probably be a blowout, as you mentioned. Gonna be a lot of garbage time points. After week one, it was Love's first game. Stuff like that didn't really have the greatest connection with Adam Thielen. He only had 12 yards that game. But since then, against the Saints, he had 54 yards. Against the Hawks, he had 145 yards, 76 yards, and 107 yards. So Adam Thielen honestly has been going off. Ends up kind of being like the underneath guy. Gets some decent target passes when it comes to yardage, but overall it just ends up being volume. So he's had 9, 14, 8, and 13 targets, and he's had 3 touchdowns. So 5 weeks into the season, he has nearly 400 yards. So I have no problem with that pick, and especially against the Dolphins, I feel like it's even more likely to happen than not.
Hmm.
Did you have another player prop? Otherwise, okay, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying. I was agreeing with what you were saying. You're embellishing my
Okay.
point that I was making. But I'm trying to decide on if I want to play this one. I'm looking currently at um, I forgot his name, Chris Godwin. Trying to find his over for
Yeah, I
his
was looking at his
receiving
too. I was
yards.
looking at his before we got started here, but Mike Evans now is supposed to play, so I feel like again Baker's just going to go back to hyper targeting him. Once he got hurt against the last week when he did get hurt, or a couple weeks ago,
Mm.
ended up I think having Chris Godwin with like 9 targets for nearly 100 yards or just over 100 yards and things like that. But now that Mike Evans is back, I think Chris Godwin's going to go back to his 4 or 5 catches game.
See, but this is a hamstring for Mike Evans, and him and his hamstring injuries have a lengthy history
That's what I'm
together.
saying.
Um,
It
so
happens a lot, but he's able to recover decently quick from them, surprisingly.
yeah, I don't care. I'm still gonna take the over. Chris
Okay.
Chris Godwin over 56 and a half yards. They're playing against Detroit this week. I think this could be a high scoring game. Um, and as we know, when Baker has an elite receiver that is going to be open, he just throws them the ball. Even if they're not open, he just continues to throw them the ball. Um, I don't think that the this game is going to be particularly close, but I do think there's going to be some points scored in this game. So this might be another garbage time kind of ordeal for them. Um, and
Mm.
then on top of that, I also like David Montgomery anytime touchdown. Um,
Oh, definitely, easily.
yeah, so those are
Jameer
my
Gibbs is already out, so
those are my two from this game. So
I like it. I like it. Anything else that you wanted to get into before we get out of here?
Nothing really. Not surprising that the Las Vegas Aces are currently up 2-0 in the series, in the WNBA Finals. I think that they're going to end up taking home the ship. I have them currently in a parlay with a couple other cross sport parlays there with Max Verstappen winning the race from last week, and then also the Chiefs winning. The week before on Thursday Night Football. So I like those odds right there. And then last but not least, I want to give a shout out to the Phillies. Never thought I'd be saying this, but that stadium, just looking at it, listening to it, that stadium was rocking, and I like I don't know. that home field advantage is something else that can't be matched in just about any other ballpark, I don't think. Those Philly fans, as we know from the days from watching the Philadelphia Eagles, they they're dirty, they're mean, but they're loyal. So
Legit.
uh, but so yeah, I like the Phillies to end up winning the World Series. They're hot right now, and I think that the last series that they just played against the Braves was basically to whoever won that was going to win the World Series. Disappointed in my Dodgers for sure, but it is what it is. Winning 100 games 4 years in a row. I guess that's not good enough to make it to the World Series, but it's neither here nor there. They made it more times than the Mariners have. But yeah, that's all I got. I can go on for days.
It's a shot at yourself.
I know.
Regular season champs for the Dodgers. You think the Aces get the sweep?
I feel like
you think that Liberty get one game.
I feel like the Liberty got to get one game. I have that line at like 2.5 for this next game. But I don't know. They've looked so
2 right now.
Yeah. So like if anything, there's like a half point of value on that, but I don't think that they're I don't think that it's going to be good for them. They haven't even really looked all that competitive, honestly. But I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. Yeah, that's all I got.
There we go. Well, thank you for listening, everybody. This has been the Call You Shot podcast with your host, Alex Harris and Drew Moore. You can find us wherever you can find your podcast, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to check at the bottom of the description for our link to our social medias. So we will see y'all next week.
And also one quick thing here. We want to make sure that you guys are liking our show. So if you like it, go ahead and give us a 5-star review. If you hate it, go ahead and give us a 1-star review. All publicity
you can dislike Drew. That's fine.
And then the same thing goes on YouTube. If you like it, thumbs up. If you don't like it, it still gets publicity. So we appreciate it.
For sure. We'll see y'all next week.
Peace.